We were talking about schools and school choice early on. So I really want to talk to you about this and get your thoughts on what's going on with Youngkin. You're in Virginia, obviously. Yeah. Education played a huge role in a Republican victory in Virginia. So I'm wondering if you can just, bring us up to speed on what's been going on,
Sure.
how you got involved, and where do you think people are in this critical race theory stuff?
So this is what's interesting, right? So I think for the first time I can remember in my lifetime, Republicans won an election in what has been increasingly a blue state on the issue of education.
Yes.
Right? Usually, what do Republicans win on? Jobs. We win on, taxes,
yeah.
right? We win regulations. We don't win on education, right? That's always been like a Democrat issue. They always come off as the ones that are more, well, what happened was, and I gotta kind of set the scene here. Democrats took control of, the House of Delegates, the Virginia Senate, and the governor for the first time in like over 20 years in Virginia. And there was one Democrat, Delegate Lopez, who represents, I think it's Arlington. And he had told people at this one campaign stop, he goes, if you give us everything, we will accomplish a lifetime's worth of work in an afternoon. And keep in mind, for 20 years, they hadn't had this sort of power. So they got to run on a lot of like aspirational things like, we're going to equality and social justice and equity. Like, okay, what does any of that mean? But it sounds good. And we're mad at Republicans right now. So they got into power and they did it. I mean, he was not lying. They did as far and as fast as they possibly could within a 2-year period of time.
Then they tried banning guns.
Oh, brother. there was a debate between me and Delegate Mark Levine. The same people that said nobody wants to take your guns, all we want is common sense gun control, and then 52 out of 54 Democrats voted for a bill that would have made you a criminal for owning a 15-round magazine.
So a low capacity magazine.
A 15-round magazine.
Wow. Well, that's horribly low
capacity. Every single magazine you would have owned, that would have been a class 1 misdemeanor with up to a year in jail and $2,500, right? So it wasn't just we're going to get rid of AR-15s.
They wanted to retroactively make people criminals.
Yes, right. And they voted for this. This is not like, some crazy loon passed this and they killed it in a subcommittee. No, they voted for this. All right, so that's where they're at. And then you saw the same thing. They did this whole like cultural competency training, right? Because who could be against cultural competency? Just like who could be against equity? Who could be against tolerance? And what this did is it set up this process whereby teachers in Virginia, in order to get their license or renew their license, had to go through cultural competency training. Well, when you go onto the Roadmap to Equity in Virginia education website, that's where you found out that, there's Ibram X. Kendi, there's Robin DiAngelo, there's Southern Poverty Law Center, like all pushing CRT. Now, what happened was parents were starting to see this stuff arrive in their classrooms. Their kids are coming home and they're making comments about it. At the same time, Democrats had removed like reporting requirements for principals for certain like criminal acts happening within a school. And so you have this perfect storm, especially in Northern Virginia. Loudoun County was like the hot spot for this, where students are coming home and talking about what's going on and the parents aren't liking it. And then you had certain equity restrictions that were taking place where now certain students that would have qualified before are not making it into certain schools or certain programs. Then you have a case where now you have I don't even know if it was a transgender female. It was a biological male that was wearing a dress, right? That was
this person wasn't trans.
Yeah, okay.
It was just a guy.
Wearing a dress.
Yeah,
right.
so that was real quick. The news was reporting that it was a transgender student, but if you actually read the details, it was just a student who wore a dress and was going in the girls' bathroom. It was a male student, not transgender.
So in the girls' bathroom, so here's the big part that kind of blew up. Was you had a father that went to a school board meeting and they were mad about a lot of things. CRT was part of it. They were mad about like some of the bathroom issues and stuff like that. And the superintendent got asked, or the president of the school board or whatnot, asked about, have there been any assaults in bathrooms? Because some of the parents were mad about this idea, like, why is a biological male going into a bathroom? And they said, no. Well, this is the part where people hate politics, and this is the reason why. There was an ongoing investigation about that. So technically, nobody had been convicted of something, right? But they sure as hell had an incident. It was like forcible sodomy, and then that student, right? That student was quietly transferred to a different school. So they did call the police. The parents were notified, but that student was transferred to a different school, where that student then reoffended.
Jeez, wow.
Right. And has now been convicted and is one of the few minors that we have in Virginia that has actually been put on the
registry.
The sexual registry, sexual offenders registry. And the judge even said after reading the psych review that it was terrifying.
Wow.
Right. So again, you have this perfect storm of all this taking place. But what was incredible was the Democrats' response to it. The Democrats' response to it was, at first, was CRT is nowhere in our classroom. And then people started to see it. And it was like, well, no, it is in my class. My kid just said this. You're a racist. Right. Well, there's stuff going on in my kid's school with respect to the bathroom. This is not a statement. You're a bigot. And I think what happened, and they weren't saying this to like hardcore conservative parents, right? We've all heard it before.
County. This is Democrat.
This is and Fairfax, right? This is you have now told an Indian immigrant family that they're racist because they're concerned about what's going on in their kid's school. And it was this.
And real quick, these school boards are like white progressives telling minorities they're the racists.
Yes. Or the sexist or the bigot or whatever it is. And I think what happened is that you had a lot of people that they weren't engaged in politics. They probably voted for Joe Biden because they thought, they hated Trump's Twitter account, right? But they had a real issue that they thought that they could bring this up to their elected representatives. And what they found out was, no. The moment you ran afoul of the Democrat narrative, the progressive narrative, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a sexist.
Not only that, the father of that the girl who was attacked was like violently dragged out, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, no. He was arrested at that school board meeting, and it was funny because that was one of the events that the school board association, right, the National School Board Association, wrote a letter to the Department of Justice, and that's where they were trying to use counterterrorism law in order to crack down at these meetings, at school board meetings. And it wasn't until a reporter, I think with the Daily Wire, actually bothered to go to the man, right? Go to the father and say, so why'd you do this? And he goes, because my daughter was raped in a Loudon school bathroom.
And they lied about it and they covered it up and they transferred the kid.
Bam.
Yep.